I'm speaking with Dr. Christian Baylis, Chief Investment Officer, Fortlake Asset Management. Christian, great pleasure to have you here in Queenstown at the Investment Leaders Forum.
Thanks so much for having me, James. Great to be here.
Now, some advisors won't be familiar with Fortlake, so how would you describe for them, in a nutshell, the firm's investment philosophy?
Yeah, we're an alternative investment management firm, so that's obviously a priority. Not that we're looking to be different for different sake, but we do use the fixed income asset, I guess a traditional type of asset, in an alternative way. That's a key point. And then I think something that often needs to be re-emphasised with people, we are an absolute return manager, meaning the primacy of the words absolute and return are very important from our perspective, meaning that we are myopically focused on the end result of what we do. We don't think that should be a forgotten conversation. And I guess what we do is we try to go about solving market problems using a fair degree of quantitative input, but we ultimately are practitioners at heart, and ultimately we try to blend those two things together in an effective way over a 2 to 3 year period. That's ultimately the philosophy of what we do.
Mm-hmm. You've achieved fairly notable returns during periods of inflation. So what are the key tactics you use or have used successfully to manage that environment effectively?
Yeah, I think, look, we use a combination of the boring old bond world, and then we use some of these other parts of the market which have been improved by key microstructure developments, such as the default market, these sorts of things, clearing houses. They have created, in my view, a totally new paradigm in what was once a pretty stale old boring asset class, and it really has changed the pools of liquidity. And what you have to find now is that you have to find that you need strategies that are 24/7 in terms of their ability to be implemented. You cannot rely on the boring old bond market. It is a fair weather friend. The capital regulations are causing unintended consequences from my perspective, i.e. public markets are becoming more private and private are becoming more public. I think that's a really key point, and that is really all about capital incentives and the regulatory environment. So what we have to do is solve problems given that new world, and I think people just need to keep an open mind about ways in which to do that, because it's not like what it used to be 10 to 15 years ago, and things will look a little bit different, and you do have to come up with strategies that ultimately have airbags in them.
Market conditions can vary, and they can vary extremely quickly and change on a dime. So how important is really being able to adapt your risk controls?
Oh, absolutely critically important. And you've got to have, I think, what I call exit stairs on every strategy that you run. So if you're running a variety of different silos, you have to know where the exit stairs are at any point in time. You have to have thresholds and tolerance levels for everything that you do. And as you said, you have to be willing to implement those on a dime, because it can change very quickly. And then equally, you have to have plans in place when there is no liquidity in places like the public markets. And I think that often surprises people. People, I think, commensurately think that public equals liquidity and liquidity equals public. That is just not the case given the new environment. So you do have to have a range of risk controls in alternative areas than where your risk is actually running, and that can be quite tricky, and it can be cross-border. And things like public holidays, things like timing of announcements, all those things become bigger variables probably than what they once were.
I mentioned you might have to change on a dime.
Yeah.
Has that become just more accentuated given recent turmoil, the recent environment, the geopolitical changes and outlook? Have you had to become more reactive and more adaptive, or it's always been that way?
Yeah, look, I mean, I always say to people, we're not in the business of being master predictors. We're in the business of trying to be master reactors. So we're always trying to work on our reaction time, not on our predictability. We think predictability is a fruitless exercise. And so we try to minimise, I guess, our reliance on that particular part of the market. But yeah, you do. You've got to be, how do you react? What are the ways in which you react? What's the speed? What are the thresholds? All of these sorts of things. And I think that's critically important in a world that can change really quickly, and particularly in the macro environment where we do have a lot of global uncertainty with obviously the Trump era and these sorts of things. Things move very quickly in that world, and you've really got to be onto it.
So investment committees, most of them, given what we're talking about, would be looking to be able to be more defensive more quickly and make changes. So what role would you say to them that your solution can play, and particularly in light of the diversification benefits it can bring?
Yeah, well, number one, you do have to be highly diversified. I always say that we're an asset class that lives in a parallel universe, or a miserable parallel universe, I should say, to the equity market, meaning we don't make 10 times on our money. We can only lose 100% of our money, and yet you only make 7 to 8% a lot of the time. Yeah. So that just by definition means you've got to have lots of diversification, meaning that you're going to have, position sizes of 1, 2, 3% a lot of the time. time, and they're not going to move the needle in isolation. So diversification is key, and then ultimately understanding how to risk control your portfolios with a variety of different implementation techniques is critically important in this world. We also have a bifurcation in our world between the public side, being the over-the-counter bond market, and then the clearinghouse side, which is almost like an exchange-traded market now. That has created effectively two sides of the market. It's a bit like a seesaw about how you balance those two sides off, but critically important in terms of how you generate alpha, but most importantly, how you manage risk.
When you're in the marketplace, as you are, offering niche, offering differentiation, is it a case that you've built it and they will come, that the market is now coming to you?
Well, I think you have to. I think it's, the good old Steve Jobs stories. People don't know what they want until you actually put it in front of them. And I think what we've really tried to do is, again, put the primacy at the forefront of what we do, meaning absolute return is what we do. Yes, we manage risk, and risk is an absolute priority, but the primacy of the word absolute return is critically important. And what you are finding now is that, as an example, we were recently up at Asia talking at the JP Morgan Hedge Fund Conference. Pathway investing is becoming a topical point, meaning people are just as interested in the pathway to the objective as opposed to the objective in and of itself. And that it really is having profound implications for hedge funds. A lot of people are allocating just to hedge funds now because they're so focused on pathway as opposed to the end result as well. So it's becoming a more expensive model. It means returns are coming down, and people ultimately need to see what side of what camp they want to be in. Do you want the objective or do you want the pathway? And ultimately, I think what we're trying to say to people, make a call and then develop products which cater to both audiences as well.
Christian Baylis, Fortlake Asset Management. It's a great pleasure speaking to you again here in Queenstown.
Thanks, James. Much appreciated.